So today we are talking about non-agricultural based civilizations. That is to say, civilizations that either have never gone through an agricultural revolution or are not in an agricultural revolution now, are no longer using agriculture as the primary method for meeting their food needs and so on. So we're talking about civilizations that have a dramatically different economic principle. These are civilizations aimed at um, that have value systems that don't match what we see as value systems. And hello to my streamers, and as always, welcome to the chat. I will be keeping an eye on chat, so think about what you would like to ask, and do feel free to interject, to make comments, and so on, and I will get around to responding to them. Okay, so I have prepared a little slide deck. So there are, to my mind, and bear in mind that this is my opinion, obviously, there are, to my mind, essentially three types of non-agriculture based societies. And the first is a society that for some reason has never farmed. Okay, this is a society that has literally never gone through the actual agricultural revolution. They have not participated in the agricultural revolution, and they've never gone to farming. Yeah, your second type of non-agricultural based civilization is a civilization that has moved beyond farming. Okay, so here I'm thinking of civilizations like the culture from Ian M. Banks's books, where they have AI and automation to the point where they no longer require agriculture as a farming method. Star Trek, of course, is the other great example here. Star Trek has a civilization based on the replicator, and they literally don't have any requirement for farming. And then the last one that I am going to talk about is the pastoral nomads. Now, technically, pastoral nomads are not farmers. Okay, so if you want to be really technical about it, they have gone through the agricultural revolution. They are obviously still of a type of farmer, but they are not a sedentary civilization, and there is some overlap between your pastoral civilizations and your non-agriculture based civilizations. Texan elves, they consume crude oil directly. Yeah. Yeah. So that would indeed be fun. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to move to talk about no agriculture civilizations. So these are civilizations that have never gone through any form of agricultural revolution whatsoever. And you have three major points that you need to consider here. So the first is that you have to think about, how do these people actually sustain themselves and how do they manage their resources? We have surplus food because of agriculture. right? So without agriculture, how do these people maintain their food, and what happens when their food supply is interrupted? Now, the most common solution to this is hunter gathering, of course, and that is what we were before the agricultural revolution. And I will talk about a hunter gatherer civilization in our world. I'll draw on the example of the Sand people to explain how such a culture could work. But it is not your only option in a fantasy world. You can also create a civilization that perhaps is oceanic. Okay, now, of course, mermaids is relevant here, but it doesn't have to be an undersea civilization. It could be a civilization that lives on the surface of the water in some way. Maybe they have these massive rafts, or maybe they have some kind of symbiotic relationship with like a giant whale that carries them around on the ocean, or giant turtles that carry them around on the ocean, and they gather the resources they need exclusively from the ocean, and so they have never entered into the active growth of food and resources. You can also here think about things like then you do have to consider your technological and magical development. So here again, we had this surplus of food, right? And the surplus of food, because of agriculture, created the ability to create bigger populations. So we had a population explosion during the agricultural revolution. For a variety of reasons, more people were needed to farm the land, and we had the surplus of food, which allowed for more people to exist, and so on. Now, that creates a situation where you've straight up got a better chance of having technological inventions because you have more people, because potentially more inventors are born, more creative thinkers are born, more people who can think of this stuff is born, and as such, you have a bigger pool of brain power to draw on. Without that specialization of labor, without that surplus of food that allows this population explosion, without allowing people to be able to become smiths and engineers and scientists and so on. Before that, people had to invest in food so much they couldn't be these specialized roles. So without that, what happens to your technological and magical development? And I think this is a kind of key part of this whole process that you need to think about. You don't have to create a hunter-gatherer society that's still in kind of the Stone Age technology-wise. You can overcome it magically, or you can have their technological development having happened as it happened with us, but you just need to overcome that limitation created by the smaller food base, which results in a smaller population and one that has less specialized positions. So these are the kind of things you need to think about in your technological and magical development, is how do you overcome that limitation? And then the third element that you need to think about is your cultural values and your societal structure. And I just want to check that everything is good. It looks good. Okay. I hope that everybody is experiencing a okay element here. It does tell me that there is some buffering, but I am going to assume that it is still a reasonably okay stream. All right, let's get back to your cultural values and societal structure. Okay, so the thing is, with your cultural values in this case, is what we often see with hunter-gatherers is they do have a close connection to nature. They do appear to understand their environment very well and to work within that environment. And you should probably consider having your um, non-agriculture based society maintain that connection to their environment, potentially also in their religion, which is likely to be animism based, perhaps with some ancestor worship thrown in, because they have a because they live so close to nature, right? They are because they are not farming, they're not changing nature to meet their requirements, right? Because that's what agriculture does. It changes nature to meet the requirements of the human. So because they're not doing that, you do have to consider that they will probably be close to nature. Their deities, their religion, their understanding of the world will be predicated on their relationship with nature. Okay, so those are your three main points to consider. And as I said, we will look at an example in a little bit. But there are some other things to consider in terms of why this would happen. Okay, so you can have non-farming sentient beings, which would obviously could result in having a environment where you would never have the agricultural revolution. All right, so I don't see an aquatic civilization going through an agricultural revolution that easily. Um, there isn't the same kinds of variations in the ocean as there is on land. Your temperature is more stable in the ocean. And because your temperature is more stable, you have a more predictable food source. So it might be that your aquatic civilization never needs to invent agriculture because they don't need that big surplus, because they don't have that variation. So your mermaid civilization might remain hunter-gatherers for the purpose of gathering food and supplies, and their development could simply be on a magical development line, their water magic or their ability to use magic and so on. And they might just not develop technologically the way that we did with farming. Another very, very different civilization type would also be your plant-based civilizations or mycological civilizations. So by this I mean mushroom people or dryads and tree ants, things like that, would be civilizations that would not be based on a um, agricultural basis. Their resource absorption, being as it is from their environment around them, they could very easily create a situation where they are just absorbing resources. They do not change the world around them in order to force the environment to give them what they need. And then the last approach that I would take to the creation of the non-farming beings is these symbiotic relationships. Now, that's like I mentioned with the oceanic people. Let's say you have this massive whale creature that carries people around, or maybe you could have an environmental relationship where you have humans or human-like people who also have some kind of animistic spirit that they have a symbiotic relationship with, and that allows them to live in their environment without the need to turn to farming for a surplus, right? You can create such a environment by setting up sentient beings that have this symbiotic relationship with each other to avoid going into the agricultural revolution. Okay, but you don't have to have a avoidance through your uh, through setting up people that don't want to go into agriculture. You could also just set up your environment so that it doesn't allow for farming. Let's say you have an extremely harsh environment, like a volcanic world, and somehow people have evolved on this world. They haven't died out from, volcanic monsters eating their faces off. A certain amount of disbelief suspension is required in these cases. So people have evolved on this world, or maybe they were dumped there as part of like a space colonization, and they can't set up agriculture due to the environment that they exist in. And in that case, they might completely avoid the agricultural revolution and just live from the land because that is all that they can. The other aspect you can lean into is potentially setting up cultural taboos against farming. So maybe these people actually have such a deep connection to the environment, to the nature that they're attached to, that it is forbidden to engage in agriculture. So I would use this if I was setting up a post-apocalypse civilization. So let's say there was a civilization, and the survivors have now rebuilt in kind of like small tribes. But all of the technology is gone, right? It's all gone. It was wiped out. And these people now have this farming was identified as the root cause of this apocalypse, and they're like, okay, never again. You will never farm again. You will never plow the land. You will never alter the environment. You must only live within the environment. You could do such a thing to set up a cultural taboo against farming. And then, of course, you can have alternatives to farming. And that's where the picture comes in that I got here on the side. It's a druid that is generating fruit off a tree. So let's say you have magic, right, that can overcome the limitation of the environment giving you the food you need. So you've got a kind of druidic magic or something that can ensure that the wild fruit trees blossom when you need them, or can call the animals to you if you're starving, and so on. You could then set up a non-agricultural society based on that magic. However, you should be aware that if you do that, the magic wielders, unless magic is common within your society and anybody can do it, the magic wielders will wield enormous power. Because basically, you're replacing agriculture with people who can mimic the effects of agriculture instantaneously. And that would give them an immense personal power in their societies. So that is something to be aware of if you follow this route. Of course, you can also replace agriculture with technology in the case of like a post-agricultural society. So that's like Star Trek's Replicator or something like that. And we will talk more about that when we talk about in the next section of this video, of this live stream. Okay, so I'm going to quickly check the chat. I do see the buffering, but apparently the audio is on point. So I'm hoping that that is still the case. Some Plains Indians look like full hunter-gatherer, but they do plant crops before spending summer. Yeah, so the interesting thing about agriculture is that um, it was a slow process to reach the point of agriculture. We didn't just go from hunter-gatherer, boom, right there to farmer. We went hunter-gatherer with plant crops slowly, and then after planting crops slowly, we eventually got to the point we um, where we then were full-time sedentary. So it's not an instantaneous process. So that is also worth thinking about in setting this up. I am sorry about the streaming health, guys. I did check my internet connection and it seemed fine. Um, I hope that the ultimate video is okay. Okay, so let's talk about an actual hunter-gatherer culture that exists in our world today, and that is the San hunter-gatherers in sub-Saharan Africa. So they live in a desert environment, which is the Kalahari Desert. It is a sand desert with some plant life, not a lot of plant life, but some plant life. And they have lived in this environment for millennia. And they have a very interesting culture, especially around things like economics. So they have a culture of sharing and reciprocity. They have a culture of gift giving. If you are in need, your friend will give you what you need. It's a very collective culture. It's a very give to each other culture. So if I have surplus and you don't, I will give you something. And when I have need, you will give me something. So it's sharing and gift giving, but there is also reciprocity built into it. Then they have the Hexero, which is a formalized exchange system that creates a kind of social connection between groups. So this is when different groups trade with each other, as opposed to when individuals share resources. So there will be a formalized exchange system where they discuss the value of what is being exchanged and then trade it with each other. It is a very, very egalitarian structure with very flat leadership. And in fact, their leadership is often task-based. So you will be the leader for the hunt, or you will be the leader for this purpose of gathering, or you will be the leader for building this structure. So it's that kind of leadership structure, and decisions for the community are taken communally by the adults who discuss it and decide on the best course of action. Now, of course, there are small communities, which makes that kind of decision making easier to manage. But it is a very, very flat structure in terms of their societal structure. And then environmentally, they are very close to their environment. They understand water management. They understand plant management. They live very close to nature in their environment. So they are a very, very interesting people. And they are one of the few I think they might be the only hunter-gatherer society that still exists in the world today. I don't know if they're the absolutely only one, but they are one of the very, very few. And their culture, therefore, is very interesting to study because of that reason, because it gives us this window into what hunter-gatherers might have lived like. I just read chat there. I wouldn't want to live in a fungus house. There just isn't mushroom. Yeah, that was a horrifying pun. So I'm going to end the stream there because I see I've been talking for 50 minutes. So the good Lord knows that's a long enough stream. I will do another stream on this topic and talk about when you come out the other end. So you've been an agricultural society and you come out the other end and you are now a post-agricultural society. So you've gone into this post-scarcity environment of Star Trek or the culture or so on. So I'm going to end the stream there. I think that the guys who are watching the stream are very behind me, and I am sorry about the buffering. I think that I will try my next stream on my phone rather than my home internet. Okay, so that was a really fun conversation. I hope that you guys enjoyed it too. I'm sorry about the buffering again, and I will see you soon for another one.